Welcome to Humanist Views, a program where you look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to take a look at a subject you probably wouldn't think us humanists would look at, but we're going to use it by using one of our core concepts, and that is the skeptical approach to looking at how we accumulate knowledge and how we decide whether something is true or not. So tonight we're going to look at the concept of ghost busting. Yes, I said ghost busting, as a real world topic. My guest tonight is Todd Torkelson. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you very much.
And Todd actually studied ghost busting. And I'm sure those of you who are skeptical are going, yeah, I don't know about that. And that's what we're going to find out. Todd's here to tell us why he went into it, what fascinated him about it, and we're going to connect it to why his approach shows us what works about the process of science and the skeptical approach to understanding how our world works. So, you actually were going to go to college to study ghost busting.
Oh yes, I was deadly serious about it. Basically growing up, I'd always been fascinated by the topic, and it really kind of galvanized and came to a point in the summer of 1984 when a movie came out starring Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray called Ghostbusters. And in the aftermath of that movie, there was a plethora of wonderful documentaries, television news stories about real-life Ghostbusters, people who actually investigate hauntings and do that for a living of sorts as their main job. And as I was just 10 years old at the time, running the usual litany of, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up, firefighter, pilot, this and that, I thought, you know, this ghost busting thing sounds really, really neat. And a good friend of mine named Aaron also shared this passion and interest. Aaron was the son of one of my mom's colleagues. My mom's a retired journalist and newspaper reporter and author. And so we decided to kind of pursue this, and we just collected every documentary, every news story on this ancient technology called VHS tapes, and we read probably every book in existence on the topic. We swapped stories, and we're really getting interested in possibly doing this for a living, or I certainly was. Aaron not as much, but he was still very interested in it. And in college, we started putting some of this stuff together and started investigating haunted locations. We actually took what our junior and senior years in high school, what our budget could afford. We had equipment from video equipment and voice-activated tape recorders, that sort of thing, and we would go into some of these places that were allegedly haunted and explore and see what we could find.
That sounds really fascinating, because here you are taking the full scientific approach to it, having the equipment to check things out and then investigate and see what you can find out. So what happened as you started doing that?
Sure. Well, what happened was we had a great time. We were having a wonderful time doing this. However, we weren't coming up with anything, any hard evidence, and we were fascinated by claims at least, and we started to learn in I guess how the skeptics movement would define the vast difference between a claim and a fact. And
just give us what the difference is of those two.
Well, a woman, a classic example, a woman comes home from work and sees an apparition of someone who used to live in the house, dressed in very old period clothing, and this apparition vanishes before her eyes. Well, that is a claim, not a fact. The claim that she saw an apparition that evaporated before her eyes is the fact. And we also got a lot of what psychology calls pareidolia, which is our pattern-seeking nature, our ability to see faces and patterns and things where there's no real pattern, there, intelligently put there, necessarily.
Yeah, so our brains, go back, because that goes back to the caution of living on the African savanna. It's the guy who saw the tiger and the guy who didn't that makes a difference as to who moves forward into the next day.
Yes, the guy who didn't is called lunch by biologists and by behavioral scientists. And so we have that nature within us, that pattern-seeking nature, and evolutionarily speaking, it's a tremendous advantage. However, it does work against us because it not only affects what we visually see, it also affects our thinking. And we start drawing correlations. Correlation always equals causation, as we're seeing in the anti-vaxxer movement, where that Jenny McCarthy started up,
Yep.
and that sort of thing. But not to get off topic.
No,
But,
no, that's an important approach to
yeah,
that, because
yeah.
let's just define what this approach to skepticism is at this stage of the program. What is the skeptical approach that we talk about when we humanists and free thinkers mean skepticism?
Well, I would say skepticism, by the mainstream definition, I think is false, and that is people think that skepticism. They look at the Minneapolis Skeptics Meetup group, of which I'm a proud member, and many other of my friends are, and they see people who just deny everything. Just, I don't believe this is a table, I don't believe this is a chair, and that's not it at all. Skepticism is understanding that we have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources in our world to solve problems. So when it comes to environmentalism, how to properly clean up the planet, how to conduct research efficiently, how to do medical research efficiently and productively so we're not wasting time. And really not seeing the world as a conservative or a liberal, but just realizing that the world's so complex, you really have to have both within you in order to see the whole picture. And when it comes to ghosts and ghost hunting or ghost busting, that's my fascination. Really reached a big fever pitch, I guess, in the late 80s when I started traveling around a bit, and I got to go to the Queen Mary and go on a lot of ghost tours there, and thought, oh, this is my calling, this is my passion, kind of a thing. Well, a friend of mine, Aaron, the before-mentioned Aaron, took me to a free convention that his father got tickets to. It was a UFO convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Cool.
And Albuquerque is where I'm from. And in there, the reason why, of course, was the Roswell incident. That was a big thing. And this UFO convention, Aaron threw a big photo in my lap. It was of a crop circle. And he was so proud. He was just, this is the landing gear of a UFO in a field in the middle of Crazy Whack, Iowa, and this is proof that, and I said, no, well, Aaron, this is, and I didn't buy it at all. I said, Aaron, this is proof that some math majors from Iowa State University had a six-pack and too much time on their hands and a couple of 2x4s. I don't think it would be priority one for an alien civilization to, use a new planet's wheat fields as an etch-a-sketch upon first contact. I don't think that's the way it is in Star Trek. You would know more about that than me. But anyway, Aaron wasn't too happy about my skepticism about this topic, and on the way home, he just turned to me and he said, Mr. Ghostbuster Extraordinaire, how can you, of all people, buy into ghost phenomena and so passionately believe in it, and yet so militantly deny UFOs and conspiracy theories and alien abductions and crop circles? And I started to answer him, and I went, and I couldn't quite give him an answer. And I really thought about this, and I thought, well, he got me, but I can't make him look like he got me. I gotta come up with something. And that UCLA, for example, had a parapsychological institute, parapsychology being the science of the supernatural that still is in existence today. Duke University had one at the Ryan Research Center on campus, where they developed the ESP cards you see in Ghostbusters.
Okay.
And I thought, this would be a really great, thing to get into, seeing that Duke University, Stanford had a ghost hunting club, and I believe so did Yale and even Harvard and these kind of schools. If this phenomena wasn't real, why would these big institutions be having these departments of parapsychology? It doesn't make sense. It's obviously real. It's virgin territory we need to explore, and that's what I'm going into the science of it for. And when I was starting off in college, I went to St. Olaf, and part of the reason down in Northfield, go Olies, and St. Olaf had at the time a para-college program in which you could design your own major. It was where a lot of people were doing, like some seminarians were doing like youth ministry major through there. Others were doing majoring in languages that were kind of out of the mainstream or a little more archaic, or specializing in like African tribal cultures or something like that. Well, I wanted to do parapsychology. After all, it's the para-college. And so I went to the head of the psychology department, Dr. Howard Thorsheim, I believe it was at the time, and went into his office, made an appointment, sat down with him, and said, Dr. Thorsheim, I'm Todd Torkelson. I'm here for the Paracollege. I'm very interested in parapsychology, focusing on ghost research with a strong secondary interest in psychic powers, ESP, mind reading, that sort of thing. What program or set of programs or courses in physics, neurology, chemistry, that kind of thing, would you recommend for this path for future graduate work, as I'd like to ultimately get a PhD in parapsychology? And he looked at me and we went,
Yeah.
and I left his office saying, like, wondering, why is this so disrespected? Because so many people on campus, I would tell them my plans and they would look at me like I'm crazy. And where this, man has had this experience since the beginning of time, what is it that is just so, how could this be fake? How could this be wrong? It's so mainstream. And well, I was home. It turns out St. Olaf, maybe because of me in part, but was finding out that students were starting to major in bizarre, archaic things. And effective my sophomore year, St. Olaf canceled the Paracollege program. And I don't know if it was because of me or not, but I'll be happy to claim credit if that's the case. But I was home about, I guess this was my sophomore year, wondering what the heck to do now that I couldn't do that. I decided to major in psychology instead, and as a lot of parapsychologists have a psychology degree, that seemed like the most logical path to go for. And when I was home, on Christmas time, I guess my sophomore years would have been about 95 or so, 1995, December, my mom called down to me and said, hey, Larry King Live is on right now. He's having on a debate between a psychic and a skeptic, and they're talking about psychic powers. Are they real or are they not? And I thought, well, cool. So I popped open the ancient technology called the VHS tape into the VCR, hit the record button, turned to channel 33, and there it was, Larry King Live. And the psychic was a very soft-spoken lady. Unfortunately, I can't remember her name. But she was talking about and presenting herself quite well, her abilities and what she does and how she can read people and tell the energies around people, past, present, future events, object reading, where a psychic will pick up an object that was at a location and where some event occurred and then tell what about that event or pick up details somehow telepathically. Well, her opponent was a man I never heard of before. His name was James the Amazing Randi. And this is at the point when I give talks about this, everyone cheers in the audience.
Yes,
all the skeptics.
He's one of our heroes in
Yes.
the skeptic department.
Oh, yes. And he basically took a totally different approach. He started talking about psychics, and he began to counter her claims in the following manner. He talked about psychic hotlines, telephone psychic hotlines, and why they're not really on the air anymore. And he told about his institution, the James Randi Educational Foundation in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And they would train psychic hotline takers very specifically to answer calls using what they called the filtering method, in which they made a general statement that could apply to just about anybody. They would narrow it down a little bit more with another statement, a little bit more, and then if the person is a true believer, you had them at $5.99 or $6.99, or in some cases $39.99 a minute, depending on what line you were talking to. And they would say things like, ring, ring, psychic hotline, can I get your name and your birthday, please? If they're really psychic, why would they have to ask? Yes, I sense there's a lot of conflict in your life right now. Oh my gosh, this is great. I sense also that this conflict surrounds money, relationships, career, those three spheres.
Yep.
And then that can apply to just about anybody, of course. And then the person would get jovial on the other end. And then at that moment, just a couple of more similar questions, and the caller had them and were trained to just keep them talking as long as possible. They were trained to speak slowly and carefully run out the minutes and run up the bill. And so, and afterwards, when a lot of these places were being discovered as just frauds, and this is what they were doing, a lot of the former employees started coming forward in droves. Dionne Warwick's Psychic Hotline Network went bankrupt. Kenny Kingston was on there. Another lady, a particularly annoying one, was Ms. Cleo, was an African-American lady from South Central LA who spoke with a Jamaican accent claiming to be from the Caribbean. Well, she had never been to the Caribbean in her life. So it was, and so many of these ex-employees were coming forward saying, I felt so bad. These people would call in and I would just make stuff up. And so James Randi then followed up with a real kicker. He said in live readings, what some psychics will do is you can tell a lot about a person's socioeconomic upbringing by their teeth. And the reason is badly crooked teeth, or even mild, somewhat crooked teeth, indicates that the person came from a lower income family that couldn't afford braces.
Yep.
And with a remarkably high degree of accuracy, you can tell that about somebody by their mouth. And you know, the psychic would say, you know, growing up, you know, you were the only little girl that you know, didn't have the fancy clothes that other kids had, and oh my gosh, you are so reading me, you are so, you know, doing this. It's like, you know, you're psychic, you're a genius, and no, it's because you look like buckwheat, but that was kind of more the reason. And then he finally really did the big kicker for me, and this really started my pattern of disbelief that led ultimately to disbelief in the supernatural in all areas, ultimately. And that was, he talked about the $1 million challenge. The James Randi Educational Foundation offers a $1 million super prize to any person or persons who can produce paranormal, occult, or supernatural phenomena of any kind under controlled scientific observing conditions. You say you're a psychic and you can bend spoons? Come to the James Randi headquarters under controlled observations. If you can do it, you win $1 million. And it's not just James Randi that does it. There's a group in England that offers a similar prize. I don't know what the value is. There's an Australian group that offers, I think, $500,000 Australian dollars. I don't know what that translates to. But worldwide, and other organizations around the globe, worldwide, you're looking at about $2.5 million. These prizes have been offered for some 30 years now.
I knew it was a serious chunk of time.
Yes, about
and
30 years.
they're still waiting for somebody to come claim them.
Exactly. And no one has even gotten past preliminary exams. Now, a lot of people have accused James Randi of being too skeptical. It's like, you know, Randi, he could have UFOs circling around his head, the Loch Ness Monster could be sitting on his lap, Bigfoot could be cuddled up at his feet, and he still wouldn't believe a thing. He's just so closed-minded, and that's really not it at all. When you talk to him and you look at the things, he wants to give away that prize because this will open up a whole new branch of science.
Definitely.
And the good folks at Skeptical Inquirer magazine and Skeptic magazine also have the power, the great gift of the internet. Anytime something unusual happens, I love the story about the psychic octopus who picked the correct team at the World Cup, and everyone thinks it's a psychic. You know, well, I'm reminded what Michael Shermer says of that incident. 1,000,000 to 1 odds happens 8 times a day in New York City.
There you go.
Think about all the other octopi who are in aquariums picking the wrong squares around the world.
Oh, I know, the poor guys.
The law of averages, that works out. But that really kind of started me on this, you know, this track.
And that's the approach to skepticism that we do take as free thinkers and humanists, is that it's like, okay, if this does happen, what is going to be the process that we figure out how it happens? We're not just going to say, okay, you know, prove it to me. We're going to study it and set it up to go. And that's why, you know, one of my favorite shows is a show called Mythbusters on the Discovery Channel, where they use the scientific method, good skeptical critical thinking, and then they use empirical documentation of what they're doing. So it comes down to figuring out, okay, how could this have happened? Can we figure it out this way? Is it going to be that we can duplicate it, or what's going to happen? And that's the process that you were going through.
Sure, yeah, and you know, on that note, I'm glad you brought up those points. One of my heroes was and still is practicing parapsychology, actually, Dr. William Roll. He was one of kind of my mentors. I was really hoping to get some sort of apprenticeship with him in parapsychology when I was in college or even high school to study under him or go on his adventures with him. He takes a very scientific approach. One of his assistants is named Christopher Chacon, who is a renowned technician, parapsychology technician, and he puts it this way: because we don't really know what ghosts are, we therefore don't know how to measure them directly. So the key is to monitor the environment in a so-called haunted location. We take a look at things like radiation levels, light levels. We take a look at temperature fluctuations. We have motion detectors in place that will detect any kind of movement, physical movement. We have, of course, cameras and sound, tape recorders, that sort of thing going on that are voice activated that will light up if something happens. And we would take baseline readings beforehand when nothing was present, allegedly,
Yep.
and to have something to compare it to, normal conditions, quote unquote. And then during the investigation itself, we would the idea is to monitor all these gauges, all this equipment, and check for any fluctuations. The analogy Christopher Chacon states is that we're not looking for a person walking along on the beach, we're looking for footprints left behind on the beach after the person walks by. And this will eventually, hopefully, allow us to gather data, empirical data, that will give us a hint as to what the molecular structure of a ghost is, what they actually are, that sort of thing. And the most common tool, which has kind of exploded in popularity for monitoring the environment, are electromagnetic field fluctuations.
I think there's a show on Sci-Fi Channel that does that, which I totally avoid.
Yes, they have a lot of them, yes, the Roto-Rooters.
Yep.
They have, a lot of these other shows use them, and it's kind of remarkable how this has become such the hallmark of ghost hunting equipment. Electromagnetic fields fluctuate so much that you could have a magnetometer, the little instrument they use. You could walk past a lit light bulb and get a spike or a fluctuation. You could walk past a metallic object even and get a slight fluctuation. You could walk past an electrical outlet in the wall and get a bob on the needle. And it's funny, parapsychology has been around for about 125 years. That's a long, long time.
That is.
In 1885, 125 years ago, the difference could not be told between animal and human blood in biology. But now, look how far we've come. We have all kinds of, our knowledge of medicine and the medical field has exploded.
Yeah.
We have so much data now in physics and astronomy and I almost said astrology. That's good.
Yeah. No. Well, that would have been the original name, but they had already taken it that way, and so because of that, they had to take astronomy.
Yeah, Freudian slip. But anyway, it's amazing how in parapsychology, after 125 years, after hundreds of thousands of investigations in the field, after numerous attempts to detect and determine what this phenomena is, all parapsychology can tell us is that a needle on an electromagnetometer bobs just a little bit when a psychic points to an empty corner and says, "I see dead people." In 125
years, especially when we look at where we've come in the fields of medicine and all the ones you mentioned, including in evolution, the study of our origins, we've come a long way, since Darwin rolled out his theory originally on what we've learned about us as human beings and the environment we live in. So that's another one of those really good signs of if your science hasn't advanced in 120 years since Conan Doyle's time,
you might be a redneck.
You might not be a real science.
It might not be a real science. Well, that's really a key thing, and it's a huge thing. I had a friend of mine who's rather conservative about that. He's a deeply, devout Christian, and he was saying, well, how could you say that? We have, everything we have accomplished so far in science is just a flash in the pan compared to what there really is out there. And how can you say ghosts don't exist? You can't prove a negative. Well, you can't prove a negative, just like we can't prove that every man in this studio right now is pregnant with triplets.
Yeah,
but is it realistic? Is it, after this much time and this much research, it's the absence of evidence, in this case, is dramatic evidence of absence.
Exactly. And the case with pink unicorns and
exactly,
that. It's like
if we wanted to build, I bring up this point in my talks to skeptics groups that I'm asked to give on my history and my topic. If we wanted to build a Smurf detector, we would have to first get a live Smurf and dissect him or her and look at behaviors and check out what Smurfs do, what kind of heat signatures they leave behind, radiation, if anything. Study them in the wild, picking Smurf berries and running from Gargamel and whatever the cat's name is. And but before we can and then we can finally start to build some equipment that can detect those types of situations and heat signatures and things. But before we can even do any of that, we have to confirm that the little blue bastards actually exist.
Exactly.
And with ghosts, like the science of ghost hunting, well, we don't even know if ghosts are real, and it's looking more and more like they're blatantly not. If after all this time and all this research has turned up nothing, it doesn't make parapsychology look too good. So.
No, it doesn't. But then that gives us more reason to study what goes on, in between our ears, because our brains, we're discovering, can be very suggestible to things. Like, when it comes to dreams and people talk about, oh, you're getting lots of deep things. Well, I like to wake up with the clock radio. And I don't like the buzzer, and I don't like music. So I wake up to the news in the morning, and they were doing a piece on ties, men's ties. And I was just in the right dream state. Well, that got dropped into my dream, and when I woke up, I heard them finishing up the story, and I knew I had been dreaming about ties. It's like, okay, here's dreams. Dreams will tell you what your brain feels like. It's thrown around, whether it does it on purpose or not. So it's understanding how easy it is for things to get in there and overcome that bias.
Yes, James Randi specializes in two things as a magician by trade, which he is, and it's how people are fooled and how people fool themselves. And it's remarkable how...
And it is a two-step process, because there are certain things you want to believe. Like you, I was a UFO aficionado back in my teens, and I started reading up all the books on that and going and then all of a sudden I started noticing, okay, he's telling this story about this incident, and he's telling this story about this incident, and it's not matching up. And then we had the bad photos and that. So I finally said, okay, I'm finally at the point where it's spaceships and alien bodies time, guys, or sorry, no.
Sure, exactly. The other thing, I guess, you had asked earlier about is skepticism important? Is it really important to debunk UFOs or kind of wild, far-out conspiracy theories? Well, the answer is yes, because one of the areas that I've been affected by personally, growing up in New Mexico and especially Albuquerque and Santa Fe, is alternative medicine. And certain alternative medicines do show some promise scientifically, but much more research needs to be done before we can really start to turn to these as viable options. For example, homeopathy. We are all familiar with that, or most of us at least. It's, drink a glass of water to cure breast cancer. Well, that's about the effect.
Exactly.
But a lot of people are turning to these, and the argument is always made, well, don't be so hard on alternative medicine because, the placebo effect is still in effect. If a person...
Up to a certain point.
Well, yes, but if a person, I've often been told by New Agers, if a person uses alternative medicine in addition to traditional therapy, it's fine. Well, the problem is when you do that, it keeps the charlatans in business, and it keeps people... A lot of folks in Santa Fe, including people who've been close to our family, go to these alternative medical clinics instead of the regular treatment, like crystal healing.
And that just spells out why we need to have a skeptic scientific approach to things.
Yes.
That was just fascinating, Todd. Thanks for joining me on the program. It'll give a lot of people to think about, and there's plenty of good books, The Skeptic Magazine, Minnesota Skeptics, and other skeptical groups, plus the amazing meeting that happens once a year, which I hear is a lot of fun.
I will be going to the amazing meeting 9 next year, so I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm jealous. I might have to see if I can fit in the budget. Thanks again.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for joining me here on Humanist Views. For more information about us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can find information on our website. We'd like to hear from you what you think of this program. So send us an old-fashioned letter, send us an email through our website, or give us a phone call. We'd love to hear what you think of this program and suggest topics for us to cover on future programs. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.